Hello everyone, this is Brooke Sturdivant, and I'm going to be talking you through the literary analysis essay that is due on April 29th, Friday, April 29th by 10 p.m. The literary analysis is quite simple. Actually, it's wonderful because it is a lot of your opinion and your understanding of a story. The only very, very important part of the writing aspect is to defend every single thing that you say, every single opinion that you have or interpretation you have of the story by defending it with examples from the story. I'm going to quickly go over what the objective is of the assignment and then take you through a poem as it's much shorter than a story. The objective is to identify the theme that is present in the story or in the poem for this particular case, and then to express how an literary element supports that particular theme. As you can see, I am taking a picture of the textbook, and as you have probably noticed, the poem that I have used in the assignment sheet, Richard Cory, is not in your textbook. It's in an old textbook that we used to use last year. I want to go ahead and use this as my example because it is short and it won't take as long to get through. However, any of the things that I am saying can be applied to any story, short story, novel, or poem for that matter. I'll begin by reading the poem Richard Cory by Edwin Arlington Robinson on page 616 of the book that you don't have. Richard Cory. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked, but still he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without the meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. Now, I would suggest in any of the stories that you choose that you read the story several times, at least twice, before deciding upon the theme. Remember again, the theme is the overall implied meaning of the text, what the author wants you as the reader to take away from the text. Almost why did they write it, but not so much what prompted them to write it. More so, what was the author attempting to get across by writing whatever piece of literature you're reading. This particular example, I read several times and really went through examining the words, examining what it was that the author wanted me to understand. And I took from it a theme that no one is exactly who they seem to be, or people are not necessarily who they look to be on the outside. I chose to write this essay using this theme, and then I chose situational irony. Now again, you're not using irony, you're using characterization, but just like irony, there are several aspects of this one literary element that you can choose to address. For example, in your textbook, it discusses several different types of characters: round characters, flat, foil, a protagonist and antagonist, and you're welcome to use these descriptors whenever you're writing. However, you may also simply choose a character and use the description that the author uses within the story to develop that character and then choose that character to express theme. A really good story to choose would be Everyday Use by Alice Walker. It's in the last chapter prior to the research chapter in your textbook, Literature, Craft, and Voice. And I would highly suggest reading that story simply because the characterization is obvious within the story, and you could choose two characters, and that would make a very well-developed paper. Now, again, at the beginning of this lecture, I suggested you only use two characters, and I really do emphasize that. Your paper should be no more than 3 pages in length, and no shorter than 2 pages for that matter. But really, to use more than 2 characters for a 3-page paper, you're becoming quite thin, given that you'll have an introduction and conclusion of at least 5 sentences. Remember that each of your body paragraphs should be 8 to 10 sentences in length, and each paragraph should have a clearly executed or stated topic sentence, which is the first sentence of every paragraph, and each of those topic sentences should be an expression of your opinion or thought. However, you are not to use any first or second person pronouns, such as I, me, we, ours, those kinds of words. Everything should be third person, his, her, theirs, that kind of thing. So be mindful of that. But you should never be using in your first or last sentence of a body paragraph a quote, question, or paraphrase. This is your expression that you're defending and then your wrap up of the particular paragraph. And you are not to use any long quotes within your paper. It's far too short of a paper to be using long quotes. So back to characterization. You should be using anything from those descriptors of round, flat, foil, so on and so forth. Or you could simply say the man always wore green. Well, green might be symbolic, let's say, of envy or of money or of wealth, that kind of thing. Perhaps a woman always wears black. That might be a descriptor of mourning. A woman always wears red. Red might be seen as sexual and something that's very appealing. If any of you have ever read The Great Gatsby, you have that great description, constant description of Tom Buchanan's mistress and how she's constantly being described as a very sensual woman in low-cut tops and form-fitting dresses, that kind of thing. Her wardrobe describes who she is as a person. Those are the kinds of things you're looking for. So in this particular poem, you would be looking at the fact that Richard Cory was very well dressed all the time. He seemed to glitter and glimmer as he walked. He was kind to everyone. He was well manicured. He was full of grace. He was well taught. He was educated. Those kinds of things that come along with being wealthy. Also take into consideration whenever you're initially soaking in the literature, when it was written, who it was written by, a male or a female, how the characters interact with one another. Those kinds of things are very important, especially when finding what you believe the theme to be. Finally, you're going to first, and I think this should be your absolute first step in writing the actual paper, is to write down your thesis statement. Because ultimately, the thesis statement is the most important sentence. I can't emphasize this enough. The most important sentence in your entire essay. It is what everything comes back to. If you are thinking of your essay as every paragraph is a helium-filled balloon, the thesis statement is the little weight that holds it on the table and doesn't allow any of them to come apart and to lift into the air away from one another and to be lost. This grounds your entire paper, so think of that. So you want to write your thesis statement. The example I have on the assignment sheet is, in the poem, Richard Cory, and you'll notice that Richard Cory is in quotes. A poem is always put in quotation marks. A novel's title is always put in italics, and a short story, which most of you will be using, is always in quotations as well. Please be aware of that. In the poem Richard Cory by Edwin Arlington Robinson, you are going to state the author's name. The perceived perfect life of Richard Cory is starkly contrasted by his unimaginable suicide, thus creating a distinct look into situational irony. So I have expressed my theme, I have expressed which literary element I am going to be using, and I've said the title of the piece as well as the author's name. These are the 4 things that I will be looking for in your thesis statement. These are very important and must be there. Let's look over the guidelines first. It says your essay should be between 2 and 3 pages, as we've talked about. It should have in-text citations from the story or poem you have chosen, and it should have a works cited page. The only source you will use is that of the piece you're reading. You are not required an outline. You should not use first or second person pronouns at all, and the essay should be written in present tense only. Please be aware of this, as there have been some issues with verb tense changes in other papers, past assignments. I've also given you examples of what your works cited page citations should look like, and I have also noted on this particular assignment sheet what I've already said about quoting short story titles and novel titles, which you wouldn't be using a novel, would be in italics. They are never underlined, and short story titles are never italicized. Your works cited source citation for any story out of your anthology and all stories you use should come out of your anthology should be done as the one above. You will replace the author's name, story name, and page numbers, simply kind of filling in the blank. As I've stated on the website, for the next week, I will be out of the country and will not have access to the website. I will have very limited access to email, but I wanted to post this particular link so that you all might be able to have a little more insight into the assignment. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, but I cannot promise that I will answer them before Monday, April 25th. The assignment again is due Friday, April 29th, 2011 by 10 p.m. In the Dropbox, you are only required the essay, which is 2 to 3 pages in length, and the works cited page. The works cited page would be your third or fourth page, depending. The extra credit assignment is over symbolism and will follow the exact same structure as the example that I've given you and as the paper you're writing, except that it will be over symbolism and not characterization. Please feel free to look up the definition of characterization and to utilize that in your analysis of the piece. Thank you.